Our final speaker in this session on transformation is the 61st mayor of Houston, Texas, one of only 2 women elected to hold this office. As mayor of the nation's 4th largest city, Annise Parker thought big. Under her leadership, the city created Rebuild Houston, a comprehensive approach to infrastructure modernization that became a model for every big city in America. It was the first such program of its kind, and once again, Mayor Parker's Houston is charting, she tackled every big city in America. She tackled homelessness, and more to the point of she tackled homelessness. And the bottom line of this story is that homelessness was reduced by 60% during the administration of Mayor Annise Parker. And more to the point of our public media summit, Mayor Parker launched a groundbreaking public safety pilot program involving the city of Houston, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, and Houston Public Media. It was the first such program of its kind, and once again, Mayor Parker's Houston is charting a course that America's other big cities are following. She's a member of the board of FirstNet, she's a newly minted Harvard professor, and she's a symbol of the pioneering spirit we need in public television. Please join me in welcoming Mayor Annise Parker.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Let me say that I'm on a one-semester fellowship at Harvard, and I have been threatened by the real professors at Harvard that I cannot say that I am a professor and I do not teach. I offer a seminar. They gave me a promotion. Yeah, they're a little picky about that in academia, I have discovered. Thank you. Let me just start, this is not what I was intended to talk about, but let me start by saying thank you for what you do. As a former mayor, I'm recent enough, I left January 1st, so it's recent enough that I still remember what it was like in that job. And I absolutely understand what you do for our cities and how much you contribute to our cities. And I have shared this with Lisa, even if I didn't grow up with public media and watching our local PBS station. One of my college roommates, who was on a full 4-year scholarship to Rice University on a music scholarship, she learned her first instrument, which was the guitar, by watching a weekly show on the local station. Talked her mother into going and getting her a secondhand guitar, learned how to play that, and led to a college scholarship and a career. So, little things mean a lot. Now, I'm here to talk about something not in the past, but for the future. And I want every one of us to stop and think about where we were on 9/11. Because I know every one of us in this room has images in our minds, permanent images of that day, where we were, how we heard, what we saw, and what we saw over and over again. Inspiring images, horrifying events. And one of the things I know we remember is first responders rushing into a building that was about to collapse. And what you may or may not know is that their supervisors were frantically calling them, telling them not to go in. And many of those first responders lost their lives because at the towers, at that moment, they could not communicate with each other. But of course, 9/11 was not the first nor the last time when inability to communicate between first responders had an impact unfortunately not the last. You know, from Columbine to San Bernardino, the need for communication, the need for information among our first responders, it's only going to grow. Now, after 9/11, Congress did a number of unprecedented things. For a brief time, that toxic culture that we see now, the barriers were broken. People joined together to act, to try to make our country safer. And Congress did something really unprecedented, a number of unprecedented things. But one of the last recommendations of the 9/11 Commission was to address the inability of first responders to communicate. And so finally, in February of 2012, Congress created FirstNet. They established a board, which is the Attorney General, the Director of Homeland Security, the Director of the Office of Management and Budget, and 12 civilians. And they gave us a mission and really a mandate and a whole lot of money. They gave us $7 billion and said, go out. Well, they gave us $7 billion, and they gave us Band 14 spectrum and said, go out, create a dedicated, nationwide, interoperable wireless broadband network for first responders. And they didn't give us a whole lot of instructions outside of that. It's designed to be a force multiplier and communication and information tool. But it is also, and part of that mandate, I'll repeat, dedicated, nationwide, interoperable wireless broadband network. Dedicated meaning that it is either completely available to first responders or it, in an emergency, can be preempted by first responders. It is nationwide, and they don't mean nationwide in the big cities. They mean nationwide at the local, state, tribal, and federal level, and actually even U.S. territories. Interoperable, meaning that everybody, no matter where they are and what kind of equipment they're starting from, has the ability to communicate with each other. I'm still stunned that we are doing this and hopeful that we meet all of our deadlines to get it done. And absolutely believe that with American technology and American know-how and the will, we can achieve this. But I'll also tell you, and I think it may have been mentioned in that little video, the average teenager with a smartphone has more processing power, has more access to informational apps than your average first responder. The technology and tools we use in cities and states across America for our first responders are, in technological terms, medieval. But even those amazing computers, you know, your cell phone, your smartphone, has more computer processing capability than the computers that put a human being on the moon. Amazing. But that cell phone fails in an emergency. A hurricane hits, a hurricane takes out the towers, it takes out wires, it takes out whatever, and you can't get a signal. You go to a big public event, and the signal overloads, and nothing gets out because so many people are trying to text or tweet or put the selfie of themselves up, and nothing gets out. And it happens to the first responders as well in those situations. If we have this new tool that FirstNet was designed to create, we open up a world of possibilities for our first responders. I can't say a whole lot more about FirstNet right now. I will invite you to go to our website, which is firstnet.gov. We're actually in the RFP stage, and it's the open RFP. We don't know at this point whether those who will respond to our request for proposals to build this system will be phone companies, cable companies, a combination of the two, some completely new tech company that has a groundbreaking idea. But we are in that gathering stage, and great information on the FirstNet website. But considering that, I would say that with FirstNet, we're building the car while driving it. Actually, I think they kind of gave us a go-kart, and we're supposed to make a sedan out of it. But no, actually, what we have is that we're standing in an airplane, and they have handed us the elements of a parachute, and they're about to kick us out of the plane, and we have to assemble the parachute before we hit the ground. That's what it feels like, but we will get it done. But the problem is that technology is constantly evolving, and the demands on first responders are expanding just as rapidly as that technology is evolving. And after spending 18 years in local elective office, I can tell you that governments are not at the cutting edge of technology and innovation and new ideas. No big bureaucracy is. Governments specialize in making sure you have enough redundancy in the system that no one gets too far out ahead, so you don't do something too stupid most of the time. Tell that to Flint, but other than that. But the demands on local first responders, I want you to consider increasing calls for local first responders. Who's going to respond to a domestic terrorist? Who's going to respond to an international act of terrorism? Who's going to respond to a mass shooting? It's going to be the local cop on the beat. It's going to be a local firefighter. And we give them great training, but Stone Age tools. And we can't wait for the full system. It may take us 10 years to build out the complete nationwide network that we have been charged with creating. And while that is going on, and while the technology is changing around us, there are lots of amazing pilots going on that are advancing us in ways that we didn't expect. Our first priority at FirstNet is voice over communication. We have to connect voice for situational awareness, for the ability in an emergency to respond. But we understand that behind voice is got to be data and video. Houston was one of the pilots for FirstNet. Houston-Harris County was one of the pilots for FirstNet, and we joined a number of other local communities, City of Los Angeles, counties in New Jersey, Colorado, New Mexico, in working out what first responders need in terms of communication, what types of equipment work best, just to give us an idea for FirstNet. But at the same time, the Department of Homeland Security has also been testing out what's possible, what's in the future. And I'm very, very proud that the City of Houston and our Houston Public Media Station came together with other entities in the community to do some absolutely pioneering work that you could do in your own communities should you choose. Our mission-critical voice is a minimum standard. What was actually happening on the ground in Houston is, I know every one of you has seen movies where it seems there's an amazing amount of surveillance on the average person walking down the street. And I can tell you, being on the government side, that while we use cameras on the street and we have great access to surveillance, there are lots and lots of gaps. And even the best surveillance doesn't get shared in real time. And that's what's so amazing about the initiative that we undertook with this data casting pilot in Houston. Houston, Las Vegas, Chicago, Washington all had elements of this project, but I'm here to talk about what we did in Houston and how impressive it was, and to encourage you to look for more opportunities to do this. Okay, I'm a politician. I'm not a scientist, nor am I a technician. But what you did, and what you do, and was what was described in the video, is serve as like the interstate highway for information. You didn't create the information. You don't oversee the information, but you allow information that is critical to first responders to travel down your interstate highway from one point to many distributed points in real time. This was a academically reviewed test. It had multiple points of potential failure and opportunity, and the system itself came through magnificently. Various elements, and I would encourage you to go to now firstresponder.gov. FirstNet.gov is the board I serve on. This, you can find out information about this pilot at firstresponder.gov. But imagine a situation where I'm in a university, and it just so happened that the pilot took place at a university where our local Channel 8 is housed. And there's been an incident in the dorm. The university police department gets a description of the perpetrator and where that perpetrator may be. They get eyes on in their closed-circuit TV camera. They can link that information directly to the university police officer out in a car. So it's not just a description, not just a picture. They can actually track the perpetrator as he moves through the campus. And if they have to stop him, they can do it in a time and a place where there's nobody else that could be endangered. Or you are a firefighter on a fire apparatus and you are rolling to the scene of a major fire. And if you're a good firefighter and you do what we expect you to do, you know where the nearest fire hydrants are, you know where, if it's a big enough building and it has enough people in it, you're supposed to have been in that building a few times and know where everything is. But maybe you're the rookie, maybe you've been a crew from another area and you're not as familiar with it. Wouldn't it be great to be able to pull up a complete schematic of that building? Every water line, every gas line, everything that might be a danger to you, hazardous materials in that building, in real time as you're rolling up to the scene, and the incident commander has full access to that information. Or terrorists have taken over a public meeting, trapped people in a ballroom, maybe a ballroom like this. Wouldn't you want to know the blueprints of the building, the access points, where the ventilation ducts are, where the access is to cutting, they want to cut power to this room. Maybe they want to turn the sprinklers on, give us all a cold shower. I don't know. But think what our first responders could do with that kind of information in real time. And you have the ability to be the conduit from the gatherers to those in the field. Now, I hesitate to bring this up, but it's also a great revenue source. Not necessarily a profit center, please, but a great revenue source. And an opportunity to use something that you have for a greater good, but also a new role for public broadcasting. A new reason for citizens to turn to a trusted provider for a new resource, public safety. Beyond education, beyond entertainment, beyond news, direct public safety. And I think this is a tremendous opportunity. And as we keep driving the car and building the car and the technology changes around us, we need to make sure that the asset that you have, that in which you have already invested, is something that, if possible, we can leverage for greater safety across the United States. Now, I will close and take questions, but I'm reminded what Mr. Butler said about the depths of support you have across America, and you do have great support. But what you had in the past, and what you were in the past, and what your business model was in the past, may very well not be what your business model is in the future. And making yourself available to the public in a new way is a great opportunity. And I'll remind everybody of the story of the young woodcutter. I'm sure everybody in here knows this story, but if you do, you get to listen to it again. And that is that young guy was looking for a job, and he decided to join a woodcutting crew. And he went to the foreman, and he said he wanted to work on the best crew, and he wanted to know who the best guy was, because he was going to beat him. And the foreman handed him an axe and said, this is the best crew, and the best guy is that man over there. And the young guy looked at the one who had been pointed out as the best woodcutter, and he saw that he was older than everybody else on the crew, and he wasn't all that big, and he thought, I can beat this guy. And so they went out on the first day, and he cut and he cut and he cut, and at the end of the day, he looked at his pile of wood and everybody else's pile of wood, and he had cut the most wood. But he noticed that the older guy had cut the second most amount of wood. He says, well, I know I'm ahead, I'm going to keep ahead. So he went out the second day, and he cut and he cut, and end of the day, it turns out that he and the older guy had cut almost the same amount of wood, and he was stunned. And he decided to go out on the third day and work even harder than he had. And he was no slouch. And he cut 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 to the end of the day, and he was worn out, and he was behind. And he went out on the fourth day, and he redoubled his efforts, and by the end of the day, he could barely lift his arms, and he looked, and he had fallen even farther behind. There was a second guy in front of him. And so as he was starting the fifth day, he swallowed his pride, and he humbled himself, and he went to the senior guy on the crew and asked him how he had managed to cut so much wood every day and so consistently. And the old guy just looked at him and he said, every morning I get up and I sharpen my axe. It is not enough to be great at what you have done. It is not enough to expand what you can do. You have an obligation to continue to imagine what you could do and should do. And I'm here to tell you that this is an opportunity to break new ground in ways that make America safer. Thank you very much.
You have time for a question? Okay. Well, that was just right. And who has a question for Mayor Parker? Sorry,
and if Lisa can tell me if I forgot anything.
Okay, over here. Yes, ma'am. I see you, Beth.
Thank you so very much. I'm Beth Courtney. I'm president of Louisiana Public Broadcasting. And we have some familiarity with working with hurricane response. And I guess I would say to you, I would hope that public broadcasting, not only delivering data, could be a bigger partner with FirstNet. Because as I want to say to the first responders in our state, sometimes the first responder is your neighbor. And we talk to your neighbor, and you have a closed loop of first responders in which they want things to be, very secure, which we understand. On the other hand, we need to integrate our ability to actually communicate with their neighbor. It takes 3 days for sometimes first responders to show up after a storm, and your neighbors has that axe cutting down the tree. So I'd like us to be at the table with you when you do this. There's an awful lot of money going towards equipment, and I've seen some of the equipment spent well, seen some of it not so much. So I would love to have us be partners with you. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am, and I'm going to give you a couple of answers in there. Yes, we should and could be partners. Now, FirstNet is about pushing the creation, guiding the RFP and the selection of a vendor and creating the system, not the end user, the first responders. And so that is a separate relationship. FirstNet is the technology. Now, I will say as a mayor, every year, and Houston's in the hurricane belt, every year at along about February, maybe March, I'd sit down, we'd call together all of our TV stations, radio stations, anybody that had a news crew, and we'd sit them all in a room together and talk about what the protocol was going to be for hurricane response, and to make sure that we had all of our the words we were going to use, how we were going to use them, what we expected when we say one thing, what we expected you to hear, and so that there were no misunderstandings. In an emergency situation, depending on the emergency situation, and hurricanes are a good example, the first responders after a hurricane are, sometimes they're fire, they're usually not police. The first responders in Houston after a hurricane are often the solid waste department and the public works department. They're out there with their big trucks and their front end loaders clearing debris off the street so that the ambulances can roll. And so we have a very broad definition of what a first responder is. And so from a FirstNet perspective, a first responder is whoever needs to have information at the scene of an incident. And from a local government perspective, a first responder, as you say, it could be the neighbors up and down the street who have chainsaws and need to be organized. And it is absolutely the responsibility of your local government officials to make sure that there is a mechanism in place, particularly in areas that are prone to regular natural disasters, to have a mechanism for activating that unofficial response network.
I should remind everybody, by the way, that the father of FirstNet was Senator J. Rockefeller of West Virginia, whose lovely wife, Sharon Percy Rockefeller, is sitting right back there. Sharon, thank you very much, okay? Who else has a question for Mayor? Yep, over here.
We have a question here.
I'm sorry, where?
Right here. So sorry. Oh, I think I'm a little short.
In the middle.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Ed Drapes.
Ed Drapes.
I'm on the board of WTVI in Charlotte. I'm also a member of Charlotte City Council. And listening to you, I thought, hey, I'm in a perfect position to act on what you're suggesting since we control the police and the fire. I'm wondering, though, what would you recommend to people at the local level? FirstNet is still kind of a national, big picture initiative. What can people do locally to act on your advice now?
Actually, drawing on the answer I gave to the previous speaker, FirstNet, as Congress has designated, is a nationwide platform that, and I guess I have to see it in my mind, it's like we're the Christmas tree and everybody hangs their ornaments on it so that everybody can see them. But that's not a really good analogy because they have to be able to talk to each other. I have to figure out a better way to say that. But from a local government perspective, it's about understanding the tools that your first responders have today. And I can tell you, and again, to the last speaker, I was the city controller for the city of Houston for 6 years, the elected controller, and one of the things I made hay out of was boxes of laptop computers that had been bought by the fire department, but after 2 years of waiting for the laptop computers, they were obsolete and they were never installed, and there's $1 million down the drain. So making sure that you take the long view and understand as a public official that technology, particularly this kind of technology, is changing so fast that as much as we want to have those redundancies and CYA things that keep us from doing things we shouldn't do and we still do the wrong things anyway, you have the biggest problem in technology at the local level is box canyons, is buying something, is going down a path, beta or VHS. And we're always on the beta side. So being aware of that, understanding that the best solution often at the local level is not a custom solution, but is the closest you can get to something off the shelf with a big provider that is committed to making innovations. And then that the first level of public safety is actually not the professional level. The first level of public safety is at the individual level, and to make sure that your first responders understand that. And I'd love to have a conversation offline with you about it.
We have one more? Yes, sir. Oh, yes, ma'am. Hi, Linda.
Hi, I'm Linda O'Brien, president of South Carolina ETV, and thank you for your comments, Mayor Parker. You mentioned that cell phones are often the first thing to go down in an emergency, a hurricane, a lot of use of cell phones. We all have towers. Many of them are 200 feet and taller. They tend to hold up better in those kinds of situations. Many of us are part of the WARN grant. What can we do to help with the infrastructure that we have to support these kinds of efforts?
In an emergency, your stations, just as all media to which the public can turn during an emergency, have a responsibility to get good information out as rapidly as possible. And yes, when everything else goes, folks will still sit in their car with their radio on. Something to connect to something over the air, something where they can get a signal for information. So your first responsibility is that. But that's what this pilot is all about, taking advantage of an existing infrastructure element that in a true natural disaster may very well be the only thing working, and that may be the only way we can get information between an incident site and first responders. So looking for opportunities to partner as we go forward in the same kind of way that Houston Public Media did in this pilot project. I think there's going to be lots and lots of things we can learn, and this is an area that's going to be churning very, very rapidly.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'd be prepared to vote for Mayor Parker for anything she wants to run for. Thank you so much.